That's okay. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We move on to the next debate, which is on Canada. It's been more than 24 hours that India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, spoke. And he said that what is happening in Canada has a broad pattern and that it does not only affect India-Canada relationship, but it singes Canada as well. And yet, more than 24 hours later, despite some condemnation coming in, Canada has not apologized for allowing a float celebrating the assassination of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This is aberrant. Here is a report, and then I come back to discuss.
This float, prominently paraded on the streets of Brampton, Canada, has put the spotlight on Canada's Khalistan problem. Now, a Canadian lawmaker is urging the authorities to act on this morbid glorification of an assassination.
The Khalistan supporters in Canada have reached a new law. The float celebrated the assassination of Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, tolerating the glorification of violence and public promotion of hate goes against everything our country believes in. Khalistan supporters have crossed the line, and Canada should and must respond.
The Prime Minister of Canada, who interferes on farmers' protests on our soil, has not a word to say.
India today called in Canada's High Commissioner to complain about remarks that you made about the farmers' protests in that country. There's warnings that you've damaged relations between India and Canada. I'd like to get your response to that.
Canada will always stand up for the right of peaceful protest anywhere around the world, and we're pleased to see moves towards de-escalation and dialogue.
Canada's cops have acted with heavy hand on other issues. India has called out Canada.
The bigger issue involved is really the space that Canada has continuously, and we are at a loss to understand, other than the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this.
But will there be a strict action beyond a shallow condemnation? Let's debate.
Friends, this is an important debate. This is an important conversation. This is an important topic to discuss. And that's why we have done this back to back yesterday and today as well. We are doing this. Joining me to discuss this, Terry Meluiski, former journalist, CBC, live from Ontario, Canada. We also have Suki Chahal, founder, the Khalsa Today, live from California. We have Sushant Sareen, senior fellow, ORF, live from Delhi. And let me begin with the former diplomat, live from Delhi, Deepak Vora. Very good evening to you all. Mr. Vora, it's been more than 24 hours since External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar really drew the red line and effectively said that this is clearly affecting India-Canada relationship. Not only that, it singes Canada. And yet, we have no official statement coming in from the Canadian side. I mean, this is really brazening it out.
Thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure to be with you on your channel, and you have such wonderful people whose knowledge and experience is much greater than mine, so thank you. I intend to learn from them. In your report, you referred to a Khalistan problem in Canada. No, sir. Canada has a Trudeau problem. Why does Canada tolerate immigrants who spout venom against their home countries? Does it make white Canadians feel superior to those savages from the third and fourth and fifth world? Or is Canada a masochist that seems to enjoy scoring self-goals? I'm sorry. May I carry on, sir? The most recent
go ahead.
Okay. The most recent and disgusting display of Canada's insensitivity is this tableau glorifying the assassination of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Very bad taste. A disgusting display of political insanity, social lunacy. Sadly, the buffoon who masquerades as the Prime Minister of his country seems to have endorsed it. Sir, on issues like this, silence is not golden. It is most vile. What can he say? He seems to believe that at moments like this, it is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Canada will offer the hackneyed excuse of freedom of expression. It does not mean freedom to abuse. Has the Canadian Prime Minister, that nattering nabob of negativism, said a word against the culprits? I would not expect him to. Although Sikhs constitute about 1% of the population of Canada, they wield political influence in several key constituencies. Sir, I would advise him to read the Adi Granth.
Okay.
So let me complete. Reflect on this phrase: however saintly garb a man may wear, he cannot conceal his inward impurity. Let me remind you of 9/11. It damaged the image of Muslims around the world more than anything else that they could have done. And this incident will damage the image of people who wear turbans and who are proud citizens of India more than anything else could have done, sir.
Oof. Mr. Vora, you know, I could not have managed this poetic flourish, but then, Mr. Milewski, you would have got the sentiment. It's insensitive, it's disgusting. The silence is vile. What's happening really there in Ottawa, Mr. Milewski?
Well, if I may, there's one mistake that a lot of Indian people have been making in debating this affair, and that is that they think that it's just Trudeau. They think that it's just the Liberal government of Canada. I regret to inform you that as bad as you make it sound, it's actually worse, because all three main parties in Canada are complicit in this looking away, this ignoring of the celebration of terrorism that is evident in this display and in many others that precede it, in which all three parties have looked the other way. The Conservatives, the NDP, upon whose favour the current Liberal government depends. So, but yes, absolutely. I mean, this is an absolute disgrace to Canada, not just that this was allowed to occur, but that we are not seeing, absent the statement that you made from Chanda Arya that you reported a moment ago, we have not heard from the party leaderships. The only thing we've heard from Jagmeet Singh, who's propping up the Liberal government, by the way, upon whose favour the present Trudeau government depends. He tweeted the other day about Operation Blue Star on the anniversary. He tweeted the other day that this was a case of the Indian state massacring worshippers. He's asking us to believe that all those hundreds of gunmen, heavily armed, were in the Golden Temple because they were worshipping. Why did they need the guns then? So this kind of nonsense has prevailed not just recently, but for decades. I've been yelling about it for 20 years. Nobody listens to me, of course. Why should they? But they should listen now to the Indian government. And a second point I would like to make is that the Indian government needs to be a little bit more sophisticated in what its demands are. It should demand that if Canada wants a favoured nation status, if Canada wants a place in the market of India, a free trade agreement with India, then India demands that it will only deal with Canadian politicians who explicitly and loudly condemn
Sushant, there is an admission of guilt, and yet we can't see any action happening. You think free trade agreement is something for which the Canadians or the Canadian government or the political establishment there is doing this? And if yes, how do we respond?
Look, I don't think Terry is guilty of anything. In fact, on the contrary, he is one person who has highlighted what has been happening in Canada with these Khalistanis more than anybody else, and he's had to pay a price for for telling the truth. So I think if anybody is guilty, it is the Canadian political system. But even more, and I hate to say this, but I will. I think it is important to point this out. You know, the moment we will raise this issue with the Canadians at the official level, the Canadians will turn back and tell us, please look inside. In your Gurdwaras, your SGPC is lauding these terrorists. They have memorials for them. They are holding up their posters. Your SGPC chief and other members of the SGPC continue to peddle this revisionist lies of what happened in 1984 and subsequently. And that one sentence that Bhindranwale never mentioned Khalistan. Everything else, raping women, butchering women, defiling Harmandir Sahib. Everything else was kosher. But he did not utter the word Khalistan. So he was perfectly fine. He was a sant. We have allowed this to happen in our own country. Tomorrow when the Canadians turn back and tell us, why are you allowing it? You are asking us, we are removed from you. Why are you allowing it in your country? Please tell me what our answer is going to be. We don't have an answer. We don't have legs to stand on this issue. And what we are doing is, in this desire to appease these goddamn Khalistanis, we are actually alienating all the other Sikhs. I take strong objection when we say, we are going to give a bad name to the Sikhs with what has happened. Sorry, we are not going to give a bad name to the Sikhs. The Sikhs have been the most loyal Indians of anybody else, right? So it's not about the Sikhs. The Sikhs are part of Mr. Vora, me. They are a part and parcel of my blood. They are my family, right? I have people in my family who are turbaned Sikhs. So it's not about Hindus and Sikhs. It's about the Khalistani scum who we have been pandering to, who we have been appeasing also. So I think it is high time the government of India, the government of Punjab looks in and empowers and strengthens the people who stand up against the Khalistanis, rather than kowtowing to people like from the SGPC and some of these other groups who continue to eulogize, who continue to laud, who continue to iconize many of these terrorists. And I think that is, I don't think I will have any answer if a Canadian was to turn around and ask me this question. I have no answer. Terry is being very polite and not asking us these questions.
No, Sushant. No, Sushant, you are trying to turn the debate on its head. But let me put it this way. There is a history when it comes to Canada.
So imagine
there is a history in case of Canada which goes back to 1985.
One second, Abhishek. I am Terry. I am asking you this question. Please answer my question.
Yeah.
What are you doing about this in your own country?
And that doesn't justify what's happened in Ontario.
I think a lot has happened, Sushant.
No,
a lot has happened over the last few years specifically. No. Of course they are. I'm not justifying. I'm not in any manner condoning any indulgence with the Khalistanis, but I'm saying it has not happened over the last few years, Sushant. But the larger point is that in the case of Canada, there is a history going back to 1985, and somehow it seems that there is an institutional support for the Khalistani elements that they get in Canada, which, for example, they don't get in Australia. Remember, just this month, just on the 4th of this month, they wanted to hold a referendum, like in Brampton, so in Sydney, but they were not allowed. They went from place to place looking for somewhere where they could park their referendum and hold it. They were not allowed by the local administration there, but that indulgence is offered, proffered, given to them in Canada. That's the point.
Yeah, but it's also being given in Britain. It's also being given in the US. We have Mr. Suji with us. Ask him. It has happened in the US. It's been happening. Look, the point is not what is happening.
Okay, Sushant, your frame is freezing.
In terms of the referendum and other these antics that these Khalistanis have been pulling off. I don't think that's the issue. I think, yes, like everybody else, I am extremely hurt that, an act of terrorism has been eulogized in the way it has been. I don't think the Canadians would probably stand for something like this if, supposing some Al-Qaeda supporters were to take out a float with showing that 2 aircraft are coming and bringing down the Twin Towers. I don't think the Canadians would have allowed something like that. So how come they are allowing something like this?
Absolutely.
Yes, this question needs to be asked. Definitely needs to be asked. But all that I'm saying is, Sheikh, that we need to also look inside and see what we have been doing over the last many years on this particular issue. And we have been turning a blind eye. And we cannot absolve ourselves.
My only difference of opinion with you is, Sushant, that is this the right time to do that? We are doing it. It's a long-term project. We have been doing it. Last few years, a lot of things have happened on the Khalistani front.
We are not doing
a proof of which is, for example, just last month. By the way,
We have regressed from the 90s. What we managed to do in the 90s, we have regressed from there. So don't tell me we are actually fighting this menace. We are not fighting this menace. We are actually kowtowing to it. We have a party right now in Punjab which has been alleged to have been in bed with some of these Khalistani elements. There are very serious allegations against them.
Okay, Mr. Sukichel, what's the Khalsa view? What's the Khalsa view from where you are? You think that this is an indulgence which is very specific to Canada, and as Terry mentioned, there is a cross-party indulgence that's happening with the vote bank there, because of which this is happening. This is allowed to happen.
No, Sushantji has mentioned something very important. And also for Terry, because Terry had paid the heavy price and nobody backed him up, actually, so nobody stood by him. And his whole life, actually, he was fighting the solo bar. He was fighting the solo bar on behalf of the mainstream Sikh community, democratic Sikh community. And the problem is, as Sushantji said, exactly, the problem is obviously there's a problem on the Western side, but there's a problem also in-house, actually. So we have to take a look inside what is happening within in India. That is a serious question. And like this reminds me one share, हमको उनसे है वफा की उम्मीद जो नहीं जानते वफा चीज क्या है. Okay, because these Canadian, you take a look actually what happened in Kamagata Maru, and it took so many years actually, so to apologize them actually. So what happened inside in Canada actually, they are not gonna listen to you actually, so they're not gonna apologize for everything. And for your information on record, I'm telling, and this float is coming, this is happening within US since 1915, even before 15, I am seeing by myself in USA. And tomorrow you're going to say actually to the US government, actually go ahead and apologize for that. That's not going to happen. Because
Mr. Voda,
it is hurting the Sikh community more than anything.
I was saying that there is a history that goes back to 1985.
So it is hurting me more.
Yeah,
because it is because I don't.
Mr. Voda, I was saying that there is a history that
I don't believe in promoting any violence actually, because this kind of a glorification of violence is wrong, because it is sending the very wrong message about the Sikh
Mr. Chair,
because when we
that's the point. That's the point that External Affairs Minister was making with that nuance of which only S. Jaishankar is capable of. He said that this can cinch Canada as well.
Sir, this is accommodation
not,
I don't think so. This is the government
this violent
issue. This
thought
is the issue
can cinch Canada as well. Mr. Voda, okay. Mr. Voda, yes, you have made your point. Mr. Voda, I was saying that there is a history in the case of Canada which goes back to 1985. Mr. Chahal corrected me. It actually goes back to Komagata Maru. And the whole idea that perhaps the British intelligence really infiltrated those elements post that incident and used them to manipulate the freedom struggle, not just in India, but in London, in Paris, in wherever our freedom fighters, the Ghadar movement was going on. But then that's history. In the present, what are the options really with us? Sushant says first fix your own problem, fix the SGPC, but that's a little long-term project. In the immediate, what do we do with the Canadians? Remember, when that extremely irresponsible comment was made by Justin Trudeau on India's farm laws. By the way, the farm laws would have done to Indian agriculture what the Canadians have already done for themselves decades back. And Justin Trudeau did not want those reforms to come in here. And then the Indian establishment really got back, snapped communication. And I remember when Justin Trudeau came with his wife and family on a visit to India, bilateral visit, in 5 days, he changed 6 or 7 kurtas just to show that, he's so into Indian culture. But then that really did not cut much ice, I believe, with Raisina. But the point is, what do we do now with this kind of indulgence that we are seeing there, continuing indulgence that we are seeing in Ottawa?
Now, when I was going to school in the United States, one of my favorite professors was a man called Robert Merton, and he proposed the law of unintended consequences. Repercussions that you don't expect through a purposive action. This is what is going to happen. Canada is a funny nation, sir. Large country with a small population and an even smaller mind. Sits at the G7 high table of rich democratic nations. Has no right to be there. Sir, may I say something to you that a couple of years ago, I think it was a Chinese diplomat who referred to this Trudeau character as boy and said you're a running dog of the Americans. And then that diplomat's boss buttonholed this character in Bali, I think, and scolded him for leaking their private conversation to the media. And when this chap lamely said, but we have freedom of the press, the guy said, you don't know how to behave. He's done that with Donald Trump, mocked him. He's now, the man has lost it. There are, I believe, three reasons for his behavior. One is commercial interest, second, local political requirements, possibly the most important, and then ignorance. What should we do? In diplomacy, we have what we call a graduated response, and Dr. S. Jaishankar has made that quite clear. For those who have been in diplomacy, like I have 50 years and counting, we understand. The first would be to punish them where it hurts, which is the stomach. Kick them. I would even go to the extent of saying that we should not encourage trade with Canada. They have very little to give us in any case that we don't have ourselves. That probably hurts them a lot. The second would be visa restrictions, to the extent that is possible. And the third would be to downgrade our political contact as much as we can. These free trade agreements and all that these guys keep touting, it's not going to work, not when they have this level of insensitivity. Now, if there are pictures of these characters who assassinated our former prime minister inside Gurdwaras, that's a different issue. But publicly displaying this adulation of terrorism, no, sir, no, sir, no, sir. This is absolutely not acceptable. So I believe if we take this graduated response, we escalate it, we make it clear to the Canadians that this will not pass. It will not be business as usual. I believe we are going to do that, sir. You will see it in the coming weeks and months. That is how Indian diplomacy works. And Mr. Sreen, with due respect, sir, we are the best in the world as far as diplomacy is concerned.
If I was allowed to be a little more provocative, please do, Terry.
Could I add one point to that as an example? India did, in one sense, wield a big stick against Canada in April of 2017, when Captain Amarinder Singh, then the Chief Minister of Punjab, of course, declared that he was not going to meet, he was going to refuse to meet a Canadian cabinet minister, Harjit Sajjan, on the grounds that he believed that Sajjan was a Khalistani sympathizer. And the Canadians promptly groveled. The Canadians caved and came up with a statement, oh, no. Sajjan said, we do not support Khalistan in any way. We support the unity of India, blah, blah, blah. And Captain Amarinder graciously accepted his victory. Thanked and congratulated Mr. Sajjan for his statement. And upon the occasion of Trudeau's ill-fated visit in 2018 to India, he did in fact meet with Harjit Sajjan, who's no longer the defense minister, by the way. But it's an example of if you stand up and you are strategic and sophisticated in your approach, it's not enough.
Yes.
What India has traditionally done is bang the table and say, why doesn't Canada lock
before I give the last word to Suki Chahal. Yes, before I give the last word to Suki Chahal, Sushant, can we be a little more provocative? For example, there is this advocacy group from Alberta which wants Alberta to be the 51st state of the United States. Would the Canadian government take kindly if, for example, we allowed the French-speaking Quebec separatist movement have an office in New Delhi? You think the Canadian government would like it if India invited Newfoundland and Labrador secessionists and asked them to hold rallies against the Trudeau government? Sushant, can we do that?
No, you can do whatever you want to do, but the problem is that it's good for polemics, but in terms of actual value, it has very little value. Simply because the movement in Quebec, it's a peculiarly Canadian kind of a thing. Where,
come on, let's do it. Let's do it, Sushant.
No, 1 second. Yeah, just listen. Now, when they can open offices within Quebec and agitate for a referendum and separation within Quebec, then why do they need to open an office in India? If they ask to open an office in India, let them open an office in India, but it doesn't really add up to anything or any of the other things which you have said. I think the stuff which we can do is there's a lot of diplomatic heft which we have, including with Canada, which can be deployed to actually make the point and get them to, start at least moving against some of these elements. not giving them a free hand, not letting them, not letting them going and intimidating and bullying and hitting and beating up people. We can always do many things. So, for example, I'll give you just one example. They have a consulate in Chandigarh, right? You can ask them to shift it out of Chandigarh. You finish that consulate off, right? That's a very small thing, but it can be done.
Yeah, good idea.
There will be retaliation from their side. Let them retaliate. But I'm just giving it to you just as, I'm just throwing something on the table, which I think will be far more useful than talking about Quebec or Alberta or any of these other places. Nobody is asking us for our help. If somebody
I was trying to be provocative, Sushant, but then unfortunately I'm running out of time. There are many things, of course, we can do. The Chandigarh consulate is a good idea. We still have to get our take care of the 700 students that are there in Canada struggling because of a scam.
So the one thing
it seems we are not getting enough cooperation on that front as well.
The one thing that you don't do is ask for visas. Because the moment you get into this goddamn visa business, you've lost the game. So understand that. Now, if you are going to go to the Canadians and beg for visas, then don't have this program.
Yes.
That's
a national call, societal call we have to take. Suki Chair, last word to you. You think we still can do something there so that the establishment in Ottawa does not or stops seeing the 800,000 Sikhs in Canada as a monolithic vote bank?
The Sikh community, Punjabi community is here in US and Canada for more than 100 years. Very hardworking people, and they have a lot of contribution on the ground within the community. We cannot ignore their contribution to American society and also the Canadian society. But as Shushanti said, I 100% agree with him that India has to put his own house in order first. We cannot react on these small things, Jackie, so that also
on that
now
note,
the sky is falling.
All right, on that note, because that's going to be a long-term project, I would end this conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Deepak Vora, Sushant Sareen, Suki Chahal and Terry joining us from Ontario. Hashtag Canada say sorry. I think that's going to be a good beginning on that note. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us tonight. Tomorrow, Arnab is back with the debate. Monday, actually.